Hello, everyone. Today, I've got the pleasure of being joined by Joe Meares Jr., the founder and CEO of KAYJAY Consulting. Joe, how are you doing today?
Thanks, Harris. Glad to be here. No, I'm doing very well. Hope you are too.
I am indeed, and it's a pleasure having you on. So, thank you very much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Let's get straight into it. So, Joe, if you wouldn't mind starting off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, how did you get into, the property industry, and how did you get to the position you're currently in now?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the time and for the ability to speak on your platform. Looking forward to the conversation. So, just to go backwards in time a little bit, when I was very little, this is going way back. I'll keep it short. Don't worry. When I was like 6 to age 10, I used to collect baseball cards, and I was very into like how much they were worth, like trying to buy them for less than they were worth. And that kind of sparked my interest in investing, I would say. So fast forward, I went to the University of Notre Dame, graduated back in 2010. I studied finance. Graduated in 2010. Was not a great year to graduate because of the great financial crisis, but I learned a lot about interviewing, got a lot of interview practice, which was good. I started taking the CFA right after I graduated. So the CFA is Chartered Financial Analyst for those of you that don't know, and it's just a certification that shows that you're very interested in investing. So I ended up getting a job at a Spanish investment bank called BBVA. Did that for about 3 years, and then I decided I wanted to get more into stocks because at the investment bank, I was doing debt capital markets, which is basically lending to large corporations. I wanted to analyze stocks. One thing that I did not mention earlier, which I should have, between the baseball cards and college, I got a brokerage account when I was in like 8th grade. So I was investing in stocks at a very young age and always wanted to come back to that. So went to another bank called SunTrust Robinson Humphrey, and I was an equity research analyst, which is a fancy way of saying I analyze stocks. And the industry that I covered there was semiconductors, like tech hardware, for the first 7 years, and then I did enterprise software for the last three. Really liked enterprise software. Semis were cool, but I was way more into the software companies. And during that time, I would say I was at that bank for a total of 10 years, almost exactly. And I would say probably 5 years into it, I just did some math and realized that if I ever wanted to be financially independent and retire early, I was going to have to have some side income. I wasn't going to be able to do it just from working at the bank. So I started reading about passive income and side hustles, and all roads were pointing back to real estate. A guy up in our Boston office I had heard was investing in real estate in Philadelphia, was doing very well, and he was nice enough to get on the phone with me back in August of 2018. We got on the phone and he described his process, and it was just very straightforward. We kind of thought about investing the same way. So I just started picking his brain. He started coaching me. So that was August of 2018. I bought my first rental in October of 2018. I bought 4 in 2018. I bought 8 in 2019. And then he and I became business partners in 2020, and we bought a 9 unit, a 12 unit, and a 24 unit apartment complex during the pandemic. And since then, I've bought a bunch of other properties. Maybe we'll talk about that, later on in the discussion. Yeah. Where I'm at right now is I left Wall Street in November of 2023, and I've been a full-time real estate investor and also a real estate coach, coaching people how to do what I do since then. So that's where I'm at right now.
Amazing stuff. And what actually was the biggest shift you needed to make that transition? Because a lot of people in your, spot are perhaps looking to make a similar change, perhaps working a corporate job in Wall Street or something pretty high up, and it's comfortable, but they kind of feel stuck. They feel in a rut, and it's not really where they want to be. So what was the biggest mindset shift you had to make? And what were some habits and some traits you had to let go of to get you to the position you're in now?
Well, they say that the two most addictive things on earth are heroin and a paycheck. So the first mindset shift you have to have is that you're going to have to give up the paycheck at some point. But yeah, I don't want people to hear my story and say, like, I'm just going to leave my job and start investing in real estate. Like, the job was the golden goose that was like laying the eggs, that was pumping money into the real estate business. So having a 9 to 5 is awesome. What I usually tell people is the mindset shift you have to make if you want to start to make that move is you have to study. So what I did was I would spend an hour, 30 minutes to an hour a day, Monday to Friday. And then on Saturday, I would do like 2 to 4 hours of work on this side business. And then Sunday, like you should take at least 1 day a week out of the 7 days where you're not doing any work, if that's possible. I know some people have to work all the time, but if
Yeah.
possible, it's good because you reset and you come back more hungry. Yeah. So the biggest mindset shift is like you have to set time aside for the side business for sure.
Yeah. You've got to make that life a priority. Otherwise, if you don't, then the life
Yes.
you're consequently choosing will become your priority.
Absolutely. And you can't say, "Oh, I don't have time now. Oh, I'm going to start later," when the like it's never going to be perfect. You got to start where you stand and figure it out as you go.
Absolutely, absolutely, perfect. And Joe, what does your day-to-day, admin look like? Obviously, I'm sure you've got lots of deals you're looking at, lots of a big team you're managing, probably going across the country, visiting, clients and investors and things like that. But if you can run us through a typical day, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could just tell you what I've done so far today. I got up around 7. I went to the gym. I walked on the treadmill for about an hour, and then I did a sauna where I read, and then I just like think about what I want to get done um, for the day. And usually the night before, I write down all the things that I want to do the next day that are goal achieving activities, not like, what I used to do, which I would say to avoid, is I would write down a big list of like easy things to get done so I'd feel accomplished, like I cross them off. Now, what I say is like, what are the needle moving, like important activities that I must do tomorrow? And it's important to do this before you go to bed because you can ask your subconscious to like help you come up with the best ways to get those done the next day. And then when you wake up, it's like it becomes very clear to you what you need to do, and you don't have to like drag yourself through the activities. You kind of are like more in flow, I would say.
Yeah.
So I went to the gym, came back, I had my list that I already knew I wanted to do, sat down on my computer, and that was, I think I sat down at noon, and it's 3 o'clock now. So I've pretty much been working since I got back. And the work that I do is, one of the things I did today was I checked in with my virtual assistant. I have a virtual assistant that helps me with a lot of work that I used to do on my own. And so try to implement as many systems as possible into the business. And then I just caught up with my other team members on some pressing issues. So really what I try to do is have certain days of the week allocated to different projects. So Monday is my coaching day. That's when I have my coaching calls with my one-on-one students. Tuesday, I try to do deep work. And also if I need to check in with other people, I'll do that. Wednesday is another day of checking in with my property managers. Thursday, I use for sales calls. And then Friday, I use for checking in with my other businesses. So I have several other businesses where one of them is another investment LLC that's investing in properties. Another one is I'm a part owner of like a website, a construction business. Another one is like another type of coaching business. So like I just have check-in calls with those other people where I'm like a minority equity holder, but I'm checking in with them to make sure that they're making progress.
Yeah,
So it's almost like a
constantly.
hybrid. It's a hybrid like consulting, ownership, coaching role.
Got ya. Got ya. Okay. And how important is a routine and having a structure to your day? How important is that? Because obviously you mentioned about planning the day before, which I think is
Yeah.
pivotal and is key. And a big thing, I love to say is needle moving, focusing on those needle moving tasks that actually drive things forward rather than keep things going in like a cog in a wheel. Just keep
Yeah.
things rolling rather than focusing on things that actually just keep you stuck, focusing on needle moving tasks that actually drive it
Mhm.
forward. So how important is having a plan, a structure to the day, and having a routine for someone who's as busy as you are?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I would say 90% of what we do on a day to day basis is a result of habit, and we do it unconsciously. And so, to the extent that you can get yourself doing those things, like going to bed at around the same time, getting up at around the same time, having dedicated time for physical fitness, for like eating, for your work. I'm a huge believer in the idea that there's no such thing as multitasking. Like, you can only do one thing at a time, and you need to have a habit and like a process in place in order to do that. And it just makes it easier if you are like, well, this is what I do every day at 9 o'clock. Like you sit down and you just start doing it versus waking up and deciding, okay, what am I going to do today? Because then you're burning all of your mental energy on deciding what to do. You need that energy for the deep work that you're going to do when you actually sit down and do it, or when you're at the gym doing your workout. How do you structure your day?
So my day is, I guess, very similar. I guess a lot of entrepreneurs I speak to is there's an element of, firefighting, but there's an element of the unknown because you might plan your day perfectly to the T and you might have a routine, but I'm sure you know this, that there's always a problem. There's always
Yeah.
something that comes up last minute. There's always something that, right, okay, I need to go here now, or I need to speak with this client. So to be honest, how I like to do it, and people who I've spoke to as well, they have maybe like a 60-40 rule where 60% structured and there's some sort of flow to it, and 40% for, things that are out of your control, having
I
that
was
flexibility.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, like, there's definitely something to be said for like over managing your schedule. Like, you don't want to have every single minute accounted for doing something because then you have no wiggle room. So, for example, today I had a 12 o'clock call and then I had your call. Like, those are the two main calls I have today. I didn't try to do like 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that gives you wiggle room in case, because I did have an issue where I had something popped up, like to your point, and the 12 o'clock call didn't get started until 12:30. So that bumped that call back. And if I had scheduled you at like 1:30 or 2, we would not be talking right now, right? So
Absolutely.
it's really important to give yourself some leeway, and you know, people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year. And if you
Absolutely.
try to get at least like one or two things done a day, that's enough.
Absolutely. And I think another thing I had in mind, and you kind of like, reading my mind, is flow state. Being able to, when you do have that structure and routine, just being locked in and focusing and getting deep work done, and having
Mhm.
that flow state where ideas can, flow through you and you can actually output and create rather than, just keep in that cycle of staying exactly where you are. So I think that's really important as well.
Dude, I think it's huge. If you're not able to get into that state, like, so this is another thing that kind of like related to what you're talking about, which is if you're just constantly doing stuff and you're totally scheduled out, you're not going to be able to get to that place where you're creative. I'm like a recovering I don't know how do you would call it, like a recovering left-brained person. My dad's an accountant and he's also a lawyer, so like super analytical, super left-brained, and I'm very much like him in a lot of ways. So I had this idea in my head, like the story that I told myself for many years was that I'm very left-brained, I'm not creative, and through like going to therapy and stuff, I've realized that I actually am very creative, and I also have figured out like ways to structure my day to bring that out of me in the best way. And one of those things is having like big chunks of time where I can kind of like work myself up into the flow state, because it's very hard to like snap into a flow state. So I think
Absolutely.
what you're saying is I'm totally agree with you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Right. Appreciate that, Joe. If we can, I guess, transition nicely onto industry trends, what
Yeah.
are some major trends and shifts you're seeing in the current, real estate and property niche? Now,
Yeah.
where do you think things are heading? Is it in a positive and you're really excited, or do you think there's some challenges up ahead? And how do you think you're going to navigate those challenges?
So I think it's the way to think about that is we work in a way that we are not reliant on the market cycle, if that makes sense. The way that, and I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is industry trends as far as like availability of target properties or as an investor. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yeah. So, for example, obviously, in property, things go up and down. So demand goes up and down. Things shift. There's transitions to maybe people purchasing certain type of
Mhm.
property over another certain type. People perhaps withholding investment and looking at other avenues. So, what are some trends you're seeing in the market? And I guess where do you think those are sort of heading to, if that kind of makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, definitely. So that's helpful. So one thing I will say is real estate is a micro game. It's not a macro game. So a lot of people will say like, "Oh, what are the hot markets?" Or if you and like sometimes I'll post stuff about this online just because people like to know. But the reality is, if you meet someone who says they're a real estate investor and they say that they're like an expert in like 25 different markets, it's just not true. It's kind of like people that say that they're wine experts. You can't know all the wines, right? You can know like a type of wine pretty well. So it's similar to that. So what we do is we have a framework. So we have returns metrics that we want to hit, or like that will we need to hit in order to even consider a deal. And so what ends up happening is in times where the cycle is on the upslope, we just see less opportunities that fit our numbers. When things get scarier for people and prices start to come down, we see a lot of opportunity. That's why we bought a bunch of units during the pandemic. And Warren Buffett has a great quote, which is essentially how we invest, which is get fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. That's really, in a nutshell, how we think about things. So right now, you have interest rates around 7%, which historically is still like right in the middle. It's not like super high. It's higher than it's been, but it doesn't make sense to expect rates to be around 3% forever. Like that's just historically low. So rates are decent right now. And then there's definitely still opportunities. Like I bought in 2024, for example, we purchased an 11 unit apartment complex in Philadelphia in April for 1.2 million. And then in September, I bought two houses in Indiana. One of them was 30,000. One of them was 35,000. And then in December, I bought six properties in Indiana for 352,000. And right now, I'm under contract, hasn't closed yet, fingers crossed, to purchase 19 properties in Indiana for 1 million. So there's opportunities are out there. You have to know where to look.
Absolutely. And I think you'd need to have a structure and a framework in place, because anyone can go and look and anyone can find deals. But finding deals that fit a metric to a proven framework that actually can not, I guess, guarantee, but, pretty well, result in a positive net return, which,
Yes.
that is what you can do. It all goes down to your point about the Warren Buffett quote, and I preach that all the time. If you act how everyone else is acting, the outcome is going to be the same as everyone else. But if you can act a bit different and a bit, out of the ordinary, then your results are definitely going to be out of the ordinary.
Yeah, we want to be contrarian investors.
Absolutely,
For sure.
That's amazing. Now, a big thing at the minute, is technology, right? In the different niches in real estate and in property. So what are some ways that you think technology and software and things like that are a big trend at the minute? How do you think that's helping the industry, or do you think it's possibly doing more damage than good? Because a lot of people use technology in different ways, either to support the business, either to pick up slack, or actually maybe do things they shouldn't be doing. So how do you think technology fits into the landscape, and do you think it's a net positive?
I think it's a net positive, but I think you have a really big problem nowadays with shiny object syndrome, and people taking a business process that they have that's already that's not good, and then trying to stack software or apps on top of it, and then it's just making it even worse. I'm a big believer that success is subtractive, so it's like I'm eternally trying to simplify things as much as possible. So like, for example, I don't have like a crazy what's it called, like a to-do list app. I literally use pen and paper. Like I have like a week planner, and that's what I use. It's very low tech, but it works for me because that's how I've always done it. I use Google Calendar. That's super important. That's how you and I met today. I had that on my calendar, so I knew I had to do that.
Yeah.
And we have property management software that we use. But I think biggest use of tech, I would say right now, that is new that I'm really trying to leverage, and like not no, I wouldn't say I'm trying. I'm like definitely leveraging it, is ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So I use it all day, every day. And there's another piece of software that's super helpful called Loom. It's like a screen recording software. I use that to record a lot of my meetings, and it creates a transcript. I take the transcript, put it into ChatGPT, say create a summary of this, and then provide next steps. Like that kind of stuff is super helpful. But I think people in general nowadays are misusing tech. Like they're trying to do too much with it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of businesses are not finding the right balance. I think now with AI, with tech, I think what a lot of people are doing is trying to push as much of it into the business as possible. And I think what that's resulting is the human touch and the human element, and what makes businesses actually, interactable. That's kind of slipping away. You have people, every business now, you're speaking to a bot, you're speaking to a robot, and then you're speaking to AI, and it doesn't quite know how to understand complex problems. But then you have that distaste between, that human connection that people want versus efficiency and productivity in businesses. So is that a challenge you find you're having within your business you've seen finding that balance?
I think that's a reason why we've been successful because, so like, for example, my property manager out in Indiana, when I started working with him, I physically went out there, sat down with him, told him what I was trying to do. And he has a lot of other investors that he works with, but he's never met them. They've never taken the time to go out there and put a face to the name. Another thing that I learned this from my mom, but like I send a lot of handwritten thank you notes. Like stuff like that is so simple, but it really goes a long way nowadays in like our digital.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And I guess if we, talk about social media, big trend at the minute, social media, I'm sure it's here to stay and it's not going anywhere. So
Right.
how do you use social media in your day to day with regards to your business, and how important is it in regards to your business and the overall growth? And what are some different avenues you're looking to take advantage of social media?
Yeah, I would say so we have an Instagram page and we have, 75,000 followers. We've been doing that since 2020. I would say that that was a huge time commitment at the beginning. It's a long-term thing where you just have to grind it out. There are certain types of accounts that lend themselves to viral growth. It's a little bit harder, I think, with a finance related, if you're doing like a comedy thing, or if you're like not wearing a shirt, like those types of things will go viral a lot easier, I
Yeah,
think. But no, social media is super important for two things in my opinion. First, it's advertising your business. You can have an amazing product, but if people don't know about it, you're not going to make any money. And then the second thing is networking. So like you and I found each other on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I think it's going to be like the biggest one for B2B and B2C because it's just not being used that way yet, and everyone that's on it is professional and presumably is making decent money. One of the things I've noticed on Instagram is like a lot of people want free stuff, and it's not been, for certain things it's good, like for clothing and things like that, and for probably like fitness supplements, like it's probably great to sell. For selling high end high ticket products, I think LinkedIn and YouTube are probably much better. And yeah, so I mean, like I said, it's good for networking and good for advertising, I think.
perfect.
2 billion people on it now. Or sorry, LinkedIn has 1 billion. I think YouTube has 2 billion. So it's like you got to be on those.
Absolutely. And what I found, what I learned recently was obviously LinkedIn has 1 billion users, but there's only a very small percentage of people that are actually posting and putting themselves out there, and
Yeah.
making people aware that, hey, I exist. This is what I have to offer to the market. Let's connect. Let's do business. So that's definitely something we've seen with people we're working with, and definitely something we're seeing across the board, that LinkedIn is very underrated at the minute. And it's not saturated. So if you're able to take advantage of that in the early days, it's probably just
Yeah.
like making an account on Instagram back in 2012, 2013.
I think you're right. And to your point, like when I started posting, it's so funny because I'll see people from high school or college that I haven't seen in a while, and they're like, "Yeah, like I see your LinkedIn stuff." I've been posting stuff on Instagram for 5 years. They don't say anything about that. They say like, "Oh, I've seen your LinkedIn stuff." So it
Absolutely.
definitely, yeah, definitely to your point stands out.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And how important is getting yourself out there, Joe? Because at the minute, everything is about branding, personal branding, getting yourself out there, getting yourself seen. So on the point of social media and LinkedIn, how important is that for yourself and for your business? And what kind of advantages does that have for yourself?
Yeah. Well, I saw this tweet the other day that was kind of funny. It's like there's 3 levels of wealth: no LinkedIn, LinkedIn, no LinkedIn. So like I'm using it right now to like kind of replace my income from my old W-2 jobs. Like I said, I left Wall Street, so that the way that I'm like replacing that income is by doing one-on-one coaching as I continue to build my real estate portfolio, because all the money that's coming in from the real estate portfolio, I'm plowing that back into the business to continue to grow it. And then at some point it'll be big enough that I'll be able to actually take the money out, and then frankly I'll probably stop doing, maybe I'll do coaching stuff with people that I really want to coach, but I won't be pushing it as much as far as advertising. But right now, most of the advertising on LinkedIn is for two things: it's for getting one-on-one students, but also investors.
Yeah.
And I actually use the coaching as almost like a trial for potential investors. Like if I like working with them in the mentorship, I'll consider working with them from an investor perspective.
That's great. Joe, if I can, hone in on now a business, what's something that's working really well for the business at the minute? What are some strengths? And what are some areas of the business that you think are currently frustrating, and some areas that think need some growth or some challenges you need to overcome?
I need to continue to work on delegating as much as I can. So I think if you can find someone else that can do something that you're doing right now 80% as well as you or better, you should delegate it, especially if they're making per hour, much less than you think you're worth per hour. So I have a really talented virtual assistant. He lives in the Philippines and he's doing at least 20 hours of work a week that I previously was doing myself. And it's been like one of the most like life-changing things. So my big focus right now is coming up with things that I'm currently doing and then figuring out ways that I can like, give them to my virtual assistant.
Oh yeah, amazing. And in terms of what's frustrating, what some areas that you think are perhaps holding back the business growth, and what some areas that you think actually look they need some update, refresh, or sort of some
Yeah.
some
Any sort of problem you have in your business is a reflection of something that's going on in your own mind. And so I wouldn't say I'm frustrated. It's more like it's very much awareness.
right?
So one thing that I'll do is there's a really simple exercise you can do. Like I recommend that you try this. It's great. So like you just take a piece of paper, you split it in two, and on one side you at the top you write what works, and at the other side you write what doesn't work. And you just list like all the things that are working, and you know if you ask yourself, if you're honest, and then things that don't work. So like for me, things that don't work would be like, drinking too much alcohol, staying up late, watching Netflix all the time. And then after you have the two lists, and then like things that do work is like, delegating things, coming up with systems, going to bed at the same time every night. And you just tell yourself, okay, I'm going to do more of what works. I'm going to do less of what doesn't work. And if you do that in like an iterative way, you're not going to recognize yourself at the end of the year, and your business results are going to skyrocket as well.
Amazing. I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try that. But
If it doesn't work, let me know, but I'm pretty sure it's going to work for you.
no, I think it's very important, especially at the beginning of the journey, or a lot of businesses, they're very much founder or owner driven. So if the person at the top, the owner, the founder hasn't got their mind right, they don't have their habits in check, they're
Oh,
not
yeah.
showcasing themselves in the best way. That's going to trickle down and leak into the business. So if
So
you don't
true.
have
So
your
true.
mindset, on point, if you don't have your health on point, if you don't have your sales and all these different skills, if they're not on point and you're not the best version of yourself, you're a reflection of your business. So if the business is
Agreed.
struggling in a certain area, if it's not doing as well as it should, maybe that's either reflection on maybe the team. But then sometimes you have to look internally as well. Maybe there's something wrong within. That
Yeah.
exercise, I guess, translate really well to that point, and that's, I guess, one way you can find a solution and try to get rid of it.
Yeah, and look, you can do it for individual little like sub parts of your business too. Like I do it at like a high level for myself, but you could be like, okay, I'm gonna do it for my health today, or I'm gonna do it for my virtual, like working with my virtual assistant, or I'm gonna do it for, in your case, like I don't know, editing podcasts or whatever. You can do it.
Yeah,
You can use it for it. You can use it for anything. The important thing is that unless you're aware of a problem, like if you have to have awareness first. Like that's the first step into fixing it.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And Joe, how, if we, for example, transition onto goals now and what the future holds for yourself, what are some goals you've set for yourself personally, and what are some goals you're looking to really achieve with the business? Is it hitting a certain metric? Is it, for example, becoming
Yeah.
more known in the industry? Is it, for example, transitioning to another country and replicating your success? What does success look like to you, and what some goals you've set for yourself for the next 6 to 12 months?
Okay. So what I'll say is this is going to be my number one suggestion for anyone watching this podcast is you need to have a goal card
Right?
and you need to carry it loosely in your pocket.
Right.
And every time you brush up against it or feel it, and this is every single day. Like this one is in my pocket every day. You think about the goal in like a relaxed, positive way, and you basically just tell yourself like in the present tense, like I am already doing this thing. And then the ways and means of being able to do it are going to kind of just come to you. I know that might sound weird, but it's how our brain works. So to answer your question, yeah, I have several goals, right? I have an easy way to think about it is happiness, health, and wealth. You should have a goal for each. So like for happiness, I have a goal, and that's pertains mostly like relationships,
Yeah.
like personal relationships. Health is just, I have an image in my head of and like a feeling of what I want to look and feel like. And then for wealth, I have two numbers. I have a monthly net cash flow number from all of my businesses that I want to achieve. And then I also have like a big number in my bank account that I want to see. So those, I mean, you could just copy that, I would say. And like for the money ones, actually for any of them, whatever pops into your head first, you probably are going to want to multiply it or make it, because like it's like if you make it crazy but you put it on the card for the first week or so, you're gonna be like, oh, this is ridiculous, like not gonna happen. And then 2 weeks later, you're gonna say, actually, like, maybe it could happen. And then after like a month or two, you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of how. And I know that I can figure it out. So that's what I would say for the goals.
Absolutely. Really appreciate that, Joe. And I guess, just actually to finish off on some advice, what advice would you have for somebody who's perhaps or is in your position where you were, when you were thinking about making that transition, it was something that, you knew you wanted to pursue. What is your one biggest piece of advice that could potentially change someone's trajectory of their life?
It's a lot of pressure.
That's what we're here for.
No,
Pressure makes life.
no, what I would say is you want to max out the value that you're providing in your current place. So there's a really good saying from Think and Grow Rich. One of my favorite books is the man or woman who does more than they're paid for will soon be paid more than for what they do. Right.
Yeah.
So if you are a janitor, you gotta clean the floors to the point where people are gonna like ask you like who cleaned these floors, or they're gonna know like Harris cleaned these floors because it's that good, or this podcast it must be one of Harris' podcasts, or this LinkedIn post is one of Joe's LinkedIn posts because it's like really helpful. So you just want to do everything that you're currently doing to the best of your ability, and don't like look off in the distance for opportunities. Like the opportunity is usually right where you are.
Amazing. Amazing. That's very, very amazing, Joe. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure a lot of people will find a lot of value in that. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, Joe, what are your next moves? Is there any way people can find you on social media? What are sort of some things lined up?
Yeah.
What can people sort of see coming out from yourself in the next few months?
Yeah, so I would follow our real estate page on Instagram. It's KAYJAY Consulting, KAYJAY You can follow us there. We also have a YouTube page. And if you want to follow me for business, mindset, real estate stuff on LinkedIn, my name, I'm sure you'll share it, but it's just Joe Meares, JoeMeares Jr. CFA, and that's on LinkedIn. But yeah, hope to, and if you guys see me on LinkedIn and you want to chat, just send me a DM and we can set up a call.
Amazing. Perfect. Joe, thank you very much. I'm sure everyone's really going to find a lot of value. Thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.